Welcome, one and all, to Big Business This Week. I'm your host, JD Durkin, here from the trading floor of the New York Stock Exchange. No shortage of news to get through in the world of business, as is always the case when we do the show, from H-1B visas to the ongoing unknown future of TikTok, and of course, Disney streaming prices going up on the heels of the Jimmy Kimmel Live drama. Lots to talk about today. Rob Schroeder joins us on the show. Rob is the Washington bureau chief at MarketWatch, and we are always grateful for his expertise and context. Rob, welcome back. Nice to have you.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
So I think there's a lot of people who are trying to make sense of the, and we'll start with the H-1B visa saga story, call it what you'd like. From where you're positioned, Rob, how do you think these recent rule changes threaten access to H-1B visas, or otherwise the top line takeaway from what we've heard out of the White House?
Yeah, absolutely, JD. And my colleague who wrote about this initially described it as an H-1B shocker, which it certainly was. You know, you have a lot of companies, household names here, like Amazon, Meta, Apple, and so on, who really rely on and pay for a lot of these types of visas to bring in very talented employees. So certainly it was a shocker, and there's the fear about this exodus of talent outside of the U.S. Now, whether the companies will continue to pay for them is something obviously that we'll see. But $100,000 a pop is certainly much greater than it was to begin with. Let's say when it was as much as say $10,000 each. So clearly, a lot of adjustment is in line here. A lot of thinking and strategizing, I should say. So that all is to be expected as these rules do kick into effect.
Rob, whenever there's, some big institution kind of goes through a split, I like to look at things through the lens of the haves and the have-nots. And I can't help but wonder if this is the sort of story that inherently benefits the big tech companies, the ones that drive the major equities and the stock markets up at the expense of smaller and medium-sized companies that may have a harder time adjusting. Is that your read as to how this could shake out?
Well, I think that is a fair lens to look at it through, JD. Companies among the ones I just mentioned, including the ones I just mentioned, and that you're thinking of, and whose technology we may be using as we speak, certainly are in a better position to afford those kinds of fees. $100,000 for some is not a lot. For others, it is a lot. And you might be a small or a medium-sized enterprise trying to get off the ground, or a startup that's seeking venture capital, that sort of thing. You're looking for backers. So yeah, this issue has certainly stirred those exact kind of questions. And as it happens, there's a group of senators who are writing to some of these companies right now saying, can you justify this for us? Why are you doing this? You're laying off workers in some cases, but you're using these kinds of visas in others. Explain that. Why is that? Break this down for us, and we'll go from there.
Is there through the lens of business, are there other countries that stand to benefit from some might call it more of a protectionist policy like this? Are there certain kind of elements outside the general political arena that are worth paying attention to?
hmm Well, certainly, when it comes to business, obviously, the U.S. is not the only game in town. California is the one state in the U.S. that benefits the most from this. But right to the north of us, of course, we have our neighbor Canada, who has businesses as well, who might want to hire these foreign workers that are highly skilled. And I'm not an expert, certainly, on Canadian immigration or labor laws, but they may very well be more limited, and countries such as Canada or the UK or others may have laxer or let's say more less stringent rules. And yes, there could be an exodus, as I said, of talent from the U.S. to other locations.
It also leads into a continuing conversation, which I feel like Wall Street had been having even before Inauguration Day, which is the broader economic impact of this administration's immigration policies. H-1B here is a big component of that as of late, but so are mass deportations in many states and communities across the country. Now that we are, in the 9 to 10 month window or so into this administration, what has that looked like through the lens of the economy, wages, the state of of the labor market?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is all, I think, part and parcel of the Trump administration's policy here. Certainly, if you look at workers in industries that rely on those immigrants, that they are in many cases, protesting this. There are councils set up for this kind of thing. Lots of thinking about this. But it remains to be seen what the overall the huge impact of this will be. Really, we're just getting started in this administration. We haven't even crossed the 1 year mark yet. So I think that there's concern about this in some quarters, but the White House says that this is what needs to happen, including here to just bring it back with the H-1B visas. We want to have more homegrown talent in these kind of industries, I think across the board, and whether that shakes out and whether that is a game changer in terms of productivity and economic growth, I think we'll understand probably later than sooner, and not sooner than later.
I like that a lot. Well, another comparable story that sort of oversects with the administration's policies with the world of business, the impending TikTok deal. This is something that goes back to Trump White House 1.0, the earliest calls to ban TikTok, the reversal from President Trump on the campaign trail, and now Oracle stock, which is up 25% so far month to date. How do you think Oracle is going about thinking about a deal like this, where and how it stands to benefit, and ultimately how might it reshape the platform and what it looks like for US users?
Yeah, JD, this is a fascinating story. I mean, as you said in your intro, it's kind of gone full circle from pariah to poster child, and now TikTok is going let's call it mostly American. And in fact, President Trump later today is expected to take the latest step in this saga and sign an executive order. Uh, Proposing another 120 days to close this deal. This has to do with national security interests and so on. But yes, Oracle is supposed to be the company that is going to be heavily involved, responsible for the data and security. The White House says Americans will control 6 of the 7 seats for a planned board on TikTok 2.0, if you'd like to call it that. So this is a growth, I would think, opportunity, not just for the companies involved, but for user engagement and so on. It's already got millions of U.S. users, and it seems to me that by keeping it around, that they would want to increase that, they would stand to benefit from that, and the app could get more popular, or just to play devil's advocate with myself, it could simply level off. You never know because it's been in use rather, for years already. It's very popular, and there was a lot of pressure to save the app. And I think that's what's going to wind up happening here. Is that it does seem like it'll stay in American hands and it'll be around for some time to come.
Yeah, that's a really interesting note, and it's one I've wondered a lot. That last point of TikTok really dominated the conversation and the zeitgeist in the pandemic. People were stuck at home.
Absolutely.
We were migrating more and more to mobile user generated content, and it dominated the game. And the Zuckerbergs, the Pachais of the world were looking over at TikTok and saying, well, we want some of that sweet spot. Let's adopt our own version of that TikTok algorithm of a vertical feed. And I just sort of wonder what the natural life cycle is of TikTok. And after all of this, when all is said and done, all the hand wringing and the geopolitics and the new board and the money and the this and the that, if at some point there's in the next couple of years, who's to say we just don't have another TikTok? And that
Yeah.
entity may now also come from China or another country as well. The advertiser component, do you have any sense on how not just users and creators, but really advertisers may react to these type of policy changes?
I don't, JD, but that's an interesting thought experiment. There was a hearing. I can't remember exactly when it was in Congress when they had the TikTok CEO, and it was quite a heated spectacle where there were lots of accusations levered against the man, against the CEO, against the company, and so on. There might be with the new ownership under new management, there might be more advertising done through TikTok, or there might be more backing of an American, let's say, headquartered company, or a U.S. controlled company, mostly U.S. controlled company. Um, but capital, as we all know well, or and advertising dollars flow where the profit's going to be. So if this turns out to be, as popular or even more popular, then it could be a win-win for lots of different people here: advertisers, investors, consumers, and so on. So it's definitely a space to watch, and we're going to get the next chapter of this here today, I think at about 3:30 in the afternoon.
Yeah, we'll definitely be watching that one closely. Speaking of advertisers, obviously the Jimmy Kimmel saga has now played itself out over the last week or so. He returned to the airways. We know how the surge of ratings he had for Tuesday night's broadcast. I wonder how you're looking, not just at the broader Disney saga in Bob Iger's version of 2.0 at the company,
Hmm.
but really to me, this interesting component of what we call the O&Os, the owned and operated, the locals, the Nexstar, the Sinclairs. It's one thing for, the parent company corporate to say Jimmy can be back on air, but now you really hit a pressure point if you got the local distributors saying, well, we're going to preempt that and we're going to go with a different direction. What has most stood out to you through the lens of business relationships in that late night story?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, JD, because I live here in the Washington D.C. area, where the local ABC station, if I'm not mistaken, is a Sinclair broadcast. And if I'm not mistaken, once again, I don't think it aired the other night. So you have like these individual decisions that you're talking about, and really, this is a story, if you like, that continues to have legs. We know that he was reinstated. We know that the broadcast was popular the other night. But the president suggested as recently as Tuesday that he might sue ABC for putting Kimmel back on the air, after he was suspended. So clearly, this is still something that's in the White House's crosshairs. This is not a situation, obviously, that Jimmy Kimmel himself, or the parent company wanted to be in, to state the obvious. But once again, I don't think this is over because of the very, very raw emotions that this stirred in many quarters. So once again, another space to watch, another story that's going to continue to develop.
Through the lens of business, I wonder kind of what you make or how you view Bob Iger's return. I had said this with an analyst we were talking to yesterday that he had such a definitive first chapter leading Disney, and then you had the Chapek era, who kind of was the first one, in a sense, to really weigh into politics in the form of that Florida bill, maybe ensnaring Disney into some political conversations it otherwise would not have wanted to be in. And for good or for bad, here's Bob Iger back at the reins once again, probably in a situation I can only imagine he really does not
Hmm.
want to be in. What do you see through Iger's leadership this time around?
Yeah, JD, I don't consider myself well enough versed in his thinking really to comment, but certainly from the standpoint of any company when it's wading into these waters, it's going to be difficult, and at the same time too, that streaming is getting more expensive. Disney, we're talking about now. Going up, I think, for the streaming, $2 to $3, depending on which service you have. So they're definitely in the spotlight right now for a couple of reasons, and they have to manage their PR in very careful ways. So it's a fascinating story to watch. But yeah, under Bob Iger's leadership, once again, uh, very worth pointing that out.
Yeah, Rob, I logged on to my Hulu Live last night to watch the Mets Cubs game, and before I could even log on, it's a whole notification telling me of price hikes.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly, millions of other users seeing the same thing. Is that kind of the new norm? And if you're like me, you'd begrudgingly, say a little something under your breath and hit okay and go on with it, or do you kind of risk some consumer backlash in addition to the Jimmy Kimmel saga of people saying, "All right,
Hmm.
enough is enough. Please stop, please stop raising my prices."
Yeah, it would be fascinating to be in those kinds of boardroom discussions or analyst discussions where you're talking about doing that. But this is not a one company story or even a two or three company story. Everyone who's in business is in business to make money. if you're publicly traded, to serve your shareholders and so on. So there's got to be some rationale behind this. But there's also this risk, obviously, that you talk about of saying, hey, I'm going to, instead of yes, I'm going to click no. It gets to be too much for people when you're also paying for groceries and your lunch at work if you don't bring your lunch and so on. And how worth it is it? And what's the competition look like? So maybe there'll be a sort of price war here among some of the streaming services. This isn't something, I confess, that I follow too closely, but it stands to reason that if they're going to compete with each other, that who knows, maybe consumers could see some good deals coming their way as they try to outdo one another, and you can watch the baseball game for a cheaper price maybe next season.
Well, that may come sooner than later. Watching the Mets, if they don't make the playoffs, it could be next season, whether I want it to be or not. I'd love to get your take, kind of more broadly. Obviously, it is a consumer-facing story with the parent company of Tylenol, so there is some market component that you track. But the claims and the efforts now from the president, from Secretary Kennedy and others, and sort of Tylenol. Um, Somewhat pushing back. Not entirely clear to me exactly what their corporate response has been. How have you viewed that story in recent days?
Yeah, for sure. Another fascinating thing to come out of Washington and corporate America. Kenvue said in a statement that they strongly disagreed with the president. And by the way, I should preface this by saying I'm not a doctor. I can talk about the issue, but from a company and politics standpoint, their statement said that sound science clearly shows that taking acetaminophen does not cause autism. So they were pretty cut and dried about that. There, they pointed to some reviews by scientists and so on. So this is quite a battle here when you have the president saying one thing and the company saying another. The stock fell about 7.5% on Monday, I believe. It did bounce back on Tuesday. Um, so yes, it's been quite the spectacle to watch, and really has consequences for health. Obviously, this is what we're talking about. This is what's driving the situation, and so there does seem still to be this great divide between what one is saying and the other is saying, and I think it's going to continue.
Yeah, and Kenvue stock, at least on the day you and I are recording this conversation, is down another 2%. I could see a lot of volatility. This kind of feels now increasing a little meme stocky, and then I
Mm,
could see like a social rallying cry from the kind of Wall Street bets crowd about this. The fundamentals
yeah.
out the window. Just that these are the sorts of stories that people tend to latch onto on one side or the other, and then there is a very real movement in the stock as a result. Rob, while I still have you, I want to get your take on any story in the world of, could be business, could be politics, could be personal finance, the economy. You think we should be paying a bit more attention to you? What's on the top of your radar this week?
Yeah, certainly. Well, JD, one thing that we're tracking into is the possibility of a government shutdown next week. The Republicans and Democrats in Congress have not been able to come up with full funding for the next fiscal year, which starts on October 1st. Now, in the past, stocks have actually tended to shrug off government shutdowns. I think in four, I believe, of the last six shutdowns, and the last one ended in 2019. Stocks have actually risen. They've kind of ignored the drama in Washington. Now, there's a wrinkle this time in that the White House is suggesting that they may, instead of furloughing or temporarily laying off some federal workers, they may permanently fire them. This brings back the days of Doge. And Elon Musk, which feels like a long time ago, but it really wasn't. I think the markets will be watching that and seeing if there's any. Well, number one, if there will be a shutdown, and number two, if there'll be any longer term effects on workers or the ability, let's say in this case of the government, to report the economic data. After all, the jobs report, for example, comes out of the Labor Department, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and that's one of the agencies here that could be affected. The markets need that kind of data when it is regularly scheduled. So that's something that we at MarketWatch are going to be looking for if, in fact, there is a shutdown.
Aren't we expecting a jobs report next Friday anyway? Friday, October 3rd?
Indeed, and if the government, if the Congress can't get its stopgap budget passed before October 1st, then that could result in a delay.
Aside from the whole conversation about the president's push to do away with quarterly earnings and do something a fair bit less often, I mean, you could envision quickly a new age environment where market participants and the broader indices are now forced to respond to less information, maybe some critics would say less transparency than we've had over not just the state of economic data, which we know can be flawed. We know is oftentimes lagging, backwards looking. We know that the controversies over the revisions, but you could very easily see things play out where maybe we have a bit of a new reality in 2026 and beyond, where we just have a little bit less information for the markets to go off of. Is that a possibility to you?
Well, you raised the quarterly reporting, and certainly that would be, or rather, the new reporting requirements, and that would be quite a change. So that has some steps to go. That's not a done deal. But I think that as far as I know, the jury is still out on that, so to speak. It's not been decided. But you might imagine that markets want more information than less in these kinds of situations, both from the government and from companies. So yeah, lots to consider there and to chew on there. But from here, once again, where I sit, we're most focused on what's going to happen to the government data should there be a shutdown and if it would be delayed.
Yeah, absolutely. My man, God, I could do this for a full hour plus with you every time we chat. Unfortunately, that's all the time I have. Rob Schroeder is the Washington bureau chief at Market Watch, doing outstanding reporting from right there inside the Beltway. Rob, always grateful for your time and your context. Thanks for being here this week.
Great to talk to you.